Is it even remotely possible to understand the complexity and uncertainty in our world and universe? Welcome, I'm Barry Kibrick, and my guest, the distinguished physicist, Dr. Jack Hokikian, not only believes we can, but that we must. With his book, The Science of Disorder, we get a scientific and philosophical examination on how the laws of thermodynamics, especially the second law that deals with entropy, affects us all in our actions and decisions. Jack, if I'm correct, it's been about 13 years since you graced the stage of Between the Lines, but you're still one of my favorite thinkers, philosophers, and physicists, so I am so grateful that you're back with us today.
Oh, I am so grateful too to be here. You have invited me back, yeah.
Well, you have to come back because now more than ever, your thoughts on entropy and the science known as the science of disorder is more important than ever. And I want to begin with the fact that you really feel if we do not grasp especially the second law of thermodynamics, which is all about entropy, which we'll get into, but the first law is all about energy, made almost most famous by E equals mc squared, because it shows you that the energy in a system can never dissipate. It always either changes forms or goes back. But the second law tells us that while that's happening, only one thing increases, and that's entropy. So first begin to shed light on the viewers what entropy actually is.
Entropy starts with the statement that all natural processes are irreversible. And irreversible processes always leave an effect or effects in nature. So everything in the universe, because time started with heat, at time equals 0, from there on, everything obeys the laws of thermodynamics, first law and second law. And entropy always increases from there on. And that's what the second law is, because it leaves an effect, and that effect is the second law, entropy.
And that's the way a physicist would describe it. Yeah. But as a theorist, you also say that this entropy affects all of our lives, not just the process of energy into matter and matter into energy, but it affects our lives, and that we need to be made more aware of it.
Yes, that's true. In fact, I have one section, why do we age irreversibly? Because our entropy increases. So everything is, including why do we age? So that's why we have to know more and more about entropy and keep track of it and try to reduce entropy production.
Try to reduce, though, if I'm correct with what you say, even trying to reduce entropy increases entropy, because any action you'll take will increase entropy.
No, it's overall, you have humanity is increasing entropy considerably now, much more than years ago, because first population has increased, and the new technology have come in, and so on. So we are increasing more and more disorder, entropy. We have to reduce. We cannot stop increasing entropy because it's dead. Everything always obeys the second law.
But even though we can't stop, what you feel is if mankind is aware of the entropy, then we have a chance of at least slowing down its growth. And yet again, that's a little confusing. Can you clarify how does that actually look in reality?
Well, we do not use the word entropy in everyday life. That's the major problem, among others. We talk everything else, but when it comes to entropy, in fact, I haven't heard much in books and so on, entropy, until there was one here. You mentioned it, if you remember. Professor Gillian Hatfield was here, and all of a sudden I was listening, watching and carefully, and you were talking complexity and so on. So I said, wow, they're talking about entropy. All of a sudden she used the word entropy, and I jumped, because I said, finally somebody has used entropy in the book itself to tell about the complexity and so on in our life. So we don't, go ahead.
Well, I want to read your words. You say the increase in entropy is what we feel and are affected by as individuals and collectively as humankind.
Yes.
But you know the word we're using that you use in the book that I think maybe we'll use even today a little bit, what entropy is in the human sphere, not in this what we'll call the science of disorder. In other words, in science, it's just the shifting of disorder, but in the human sphere, it's really the law of unintended consequences.
Exactly. When people when people do things, they never think that, how much entropy is going to create and so on. So, but we have to be aware of it. Humanity has to. In fact, toward the end of the book, I keep emphasizing that fact, that science has to put it together and tell people more about the second law of thermodynamics.
But there's also certain contradictions that you share with us. Let's give one about agriculture. Yes. And as you say, the Green Revolution. What that is, and it's not, quote, now the Green Revolution, but the original Green Revolution, when we realized that fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, all sorts of things like that could literally increase food production and save many lives by people no longer having to starve. We've decreased starvation in the world tremendously, but that alone created some of the biggest amount of entropy. And I know you don't want to see people starving, but you want us to be aware, and how do we control this entropy that comes from this now mass production of agriculture?
Well, there are two kinds. One is the one that you use fertilizers and so on, and but there is also another group that which is organic. Those people do not use fertilizer or any other. And that's what people should learn, that we have other options too. Of course, the other one does not create as much food maybe as the other, but yes, you're creating more food, but you're creating also much more entropy in the environment.
But then how do we weigh the fact that human lives are saved by not starving versus those, because the whole ecosystem, though, is getting destroyed by the fertilizer, herbicide, pesticide runoff.
Right.
It's a very difficult balance.
Indeed. Well, for one thing, when I was here today, population has increased. That's another thing too. Population is increasing, so they want more food, not only more food, more technology, more this, more that, and more entropy, and more pollution, more of this. So I don't have I know you asked last time too, what's the solution? There is no solution to the second law, because the moment you try to do something, you still create entropy. You see what, like you were saying, you cannot, it's just that people have to be aware of it, and at least not create more entropy, and that's what I am trying to tell.
But at the same time, you're a physicist.
Yes.
You're not a Luddite. You know that technology is going to increase, but yet on your website, one of the things you are concerned about is the smartphone, in fact, and yet we're not going to get rid of it. No. But you say that has an entropic effect that's maybe greater than almost anything right now.
Well, that section which I added recently it's about attention span also. And what's causing? It turns out that they did a study a few years ago, and they found out that human attention span now is now 8 seconds. And what is attention span? Is the time that you spend concentrating. And 8 seconds back, you don't concentrate anymore because you're doing other things. Your mind is, so that's what the problem is. It has an effect. If in this case is your attention span. And when I want to say something. When I was at Fresno State, 1960s, and I went to upper division, the professor the first day said, "We are now here upper division. Physics books are much more difficult than the one you were taking before. So I suggest strongly that when you go home, make sure that your desk is facing the wall. If you have windows on both sides or one side, make sure that you put the drapes on so you don't look outside or anything. And turn radio and television and so on off and concentrate. Concentrate. I mean, full attention. While now attention span has come to 8 seconds. What a change. You see what? And apparently before it was 20 also. And one book that I mentioned says, hey, it is 20 seconds now. But that was 1980 or so. So it's deteriorating. The brain doesn't have that attention that when I went to school and others.
But yet, as you look at progress, there's no doubt none of us here would want to live back in the caveman time. Now, there's no doubt that prehistoric man caused less entropy than modern man. So here's the interesting question now that I'm going to pose to you. We know that this entropy is increasing. Yes. And it's increasing as time goes on, no matter what. We can throw out every cell phone. The entropy is still going to increase. We can do anything we want because it's the second law of thermodynamics. The entropy is going to increase. Is it at all possible, and you even sense once in the book, I think you mentioned it with the measles vaccine, but is it at all possible that increasing entropy may not be so terrible? Now, I know if I said it the other way, if I said unintended consequences, I don't know, maybe not all unintended consequences are so terrible. It's just a thought question. I know it's not in the book, Jack, but I'm curious about that because if it's not going away and it's only increasing and to a certain extent life is getting better, maybe entropy's not as bad as we think.
Well, that's true in a sense that if we cannot increase entropy, we're dead. It's the end of the universe. So we have to increase. But the less entropy we increase as humanity, longer it will last. If you start increasing more and more and more, you don't know eventually what's going to happen. I cannot predict the future. But if you want to last long, you have to reduce more and more entropy. Instead of just increasing more and more. That's what I'm trying to say.
But you know, there's that funny joke about where they say to the man, you know, if you stop drinking and smoking, you're going to live longer. And the guy says, no, I'm not. I'm just going to feel like I'm living longer. So I know you don't want to take away the joy out of life. So how important... Yet, because in a sense, though, life expectancies are also increasing, which we know is increasing entropy. Because the older we live, the more entropy we're creating. But again, do you want to die soon so you don't create entropy? No,
No,
not
no,
unless you're a
yes,
nihilist.
yes. No, no, no. First, we have to tell the world about entropy, which most people do not know yet what the second law is about, so that people can make their own decision what they want to do. I'm not going to tell people what they have to do or they have not to do, but that's the point. The same way as the universe. If the universe creates so much entropy, so much, it will not last long. But it's creating a lot of entropy, but still it's going to last a long time. So if humanity wants to stay longer and longer and longer, in totality, we have to reduce entropy. That's the point.
Okay, but I think there's something interesting that you say. This is going to veer a little bit from entropy, but I believe it's because you wrote about it. I know that it has its roots in it. And that is that when we do talk about the reasoning and the smartphones and things like that, you say that we are, even IBM gives this warning you wrote on your website. The fact that every day we create 2.5 quintillion bytes of data, the overall quantity of data produced per day is well defined. The quality of the content, however, is undefined. That's where I get a sense your big concern is with the entropy known as modern technology, is that we are able to increase the processing, but not increase the quality.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, we're doing even more maybe now. But the quality of what we're producing is the same thing. Like before, when I was here, there was no such thing as fake news and so on. Now we have also fake news and so on. So we are creating so much more. All these gadgets and through the internet, people are creating more and more stuff and sending and sending and sending. So that's what entropy is higher now than much higher.
Well,
but they don't know the most principal things that they should know is entropy, the second law. That's what I am talking about.
So what we're missing is the most important elements due to all of the superfluous elements that are floating. And that's why the entropy with the danger is in increasing that.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. In fact, in the book, there was one person who said it is about we're creating too much entropy in our writings and so on, in our everyday life. And that was before. Now with all this technology, I get so much spam and all kinds of stuff daily too. And I delete. There are a lot of delete that I use.
Well, I thought the best part was when you under this heading of the effects of technology and thinking and reasoning, you say these words, and I think this, if anything, is a cautionary tale. People now are tailoring questions they ask to ones that computers can answer versus deep, rigorous reasoning. So in a sense, we've created this, and now we're feeding the beast, knowing what the beast knows, and we're not going back to that deep, what your professor told you to do, close the blinds, put the door, and concentrate. So that's where your real fear is, and you still, because of your knowledge of thermodynamics, say that's due to entropy.
My point is that the more we have to tell the world about entropy, and eventually we will see that people will start lowering maybe. In fact, a lot of things, it's what's called electronic junk or electronic entropy. And that's what. Did I answer or not yet?
Well, because there is no answer really.
That's right, yeah. I cannot do anything about entropy because entropy has been around since time equals zero until the end. But my point is again that the more we understand the second law, the more we will see that a lot of things we are doing is maybe unnecessary sometimes. It's just junk mail or junk this, spams and other things.
Well,
Last time when I was here, I think we were talking spam and all that. But nowadays it's much worse, like hacking. There wasn't before hacking, and cyber attack or cyber warfare. Those words were not used 10 years ago or so, 15 years ago. Now we are using. So things are getting even, every technology bringing, it looks like it's getting now more disorder out there.
well, one of the solutions, though, I think resides in these words. Science and philosophy were once unified, and both seeking the truth of the universe. Today we have philosophy without science, and science is being taken over by technology. So in order for us to, I guess, create less disorder, it would seem we almost have to think more philosophical from the words you're saying.
Yes. It turns out, Barry, that physics was philosophy. You know, I keep saying in my book, not a lot, but one time, about philosophy. And because it was science and philosophy together made the physics. Questions of natural philosophy. That's where the word is. And physics, apparently, if you translate and so on, it becomes natural philosophy. Until 19th century, apparently, it was those words. But now it's only physics. We don't hear about it.
Now, something that I found interesting that I would have thought you were for, knowing you're not against, but you're at least again. That's the interesting part. All you're doing is wanting to warn the people to think about this. You say that globalization itself and the fall of physical barriers is increasing entropy. So just the fact that we now deal not only in our neighborhood, not only in our city, not only in our state, but throughout a world, online and through the air and through the sea, that in itself is a form of increased entropy that we have to at least, again, can't control it, can't stop it, but need to be aware of it.
Yes, globalization has increased entropy a lot. If nothing else, the movement of things around, that creates a lot of entropy. And you don't know anymore what's going on, all those globalization business. That's what it is. It's a major increase in entropy, globalization. Instead of doing something here, you do something there, and then you bring it, all that. And it creates more entropy.
Well, you use a chemist, G. Tyler Miller, in your book, and you say, the real imperative we should learn from thermodynamics is simple yet profound. Whenever you do anything, be sure to take into account its present and possible future impact on the surroundings. So that seems to also be the core of your message. Not to not do it, but take it into account.
You got it, Barry. That's what you cannot stop the thing. And that's, I like very much, I think. That's why I'm glad you emphasize that point. That's true. We have to see what we're doing also. That's a very good statement.
Well, you wrote it, Jack, so I know it's good. And on those words, I'm going to end with your few more final words by you. You say, we need a new generation of people who are bonded together with a common understanding of the basic laws of thermodynamics. Jack, thank you for shedding much of that and sharing much of that with us.
Thank you for having me here.
It's my pleasure. And thank you all for joining us. Now, before Jack leaves, I'd like to leave you with these few more words from the science of disorder. We cannot unlearn knowledge nor hide technology. Consequently, every item of knowledge we acquire adds a certain responsibility as to its usage, because its applications will irreversibly change the state of our thermodynamic system. As time goes on, the application of knowledge and demand from us greater and greater wisdom. I'm Barry Kibrick. As time goes on, it's more important than ever to see what lies between all our increased technology and knowledge. And if we look close enough, we just might find the greater wisdom. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you for that.
My pleasure, sir.
To connect with Barry, like him on Facebook and follow him on Twitter @Barry Kibrick. And to contact Barry directly, view past episodes of Between the Lines, and read his weekly blog, visit us at barrykibrick.com.